power are at the core of it. Phenomenal information from both of there and Patty and Joanna as well, Smart Wires. So with that, we're going to go back to the build. Smart construction, design and innovation, efficient development, and scalable builds. I'm going to hand it over to Kurt Lindorfer from Paradigm Structural Engineers to take it away.
Thanks, Adam. First of all, thanks everybody for staying. Adam, of course, puts us here at the very end of the panel, so I'm going to try to speak slowly and loudly. And then here's the big word, cocktails after. So, okay. So with that said, what we're going to do is we're going to do self-introductions, and then we're going to answer the one question: who would you most want to have a 2-minute conversation with? The key is 2 minutes, and you'll see why in a minute. 2-minute conversation with past, present, real, or fictional. So, anyway. I'm Kurt Lindorfer, founding principal of Paradigm Structural Engineers. We have offices in San Francisco, Chicago, Dallas, and soon in Virginia. We do a lot of data centers. We do life sciences, healthcare, and aviation. With that said, the person I would most want to have a 2-minute conversation with is a real person, was a real person, and it's Thomas Jefferson. So, anyway, I'll turn it over to each one of those individuals to introduce yourselves.
Hello, I'm Jeff Young with GCG, and we focus on prefabricated solutions and custom engineered solutions for data centers. As far as who I would like to meet would be Alan Turing. He was a founder really of the modern computer system and AI, as well as saved our bridges in World War II, cracking the code, and so that would be somebody that I would find very interesting to talk to.
Great. My name is Steve Kundich. I'm with Ada Infrastructure. A bit of my background was with the founding of Digital Realty Trust, and was at Meta for a number of years after that, and now part of Ada Infrastructure. And I had a couple answers to this question, but I would go with Ada Lovelace. She was arguably the first computer program that wrote the algorithm on Charles Babbage's analytical engine. And I think after she sits through one of these conferences and sees where things are going, it would be great to get her perspective, because she really saw that this type of compute could do a lot of good for humanity besides just crunching numbers. So it'd be great to get her perspective.
My name is Blake Ross-Kelly. I am with Clark Pacific, and Kurt, you and I, we have 2 things in common on stage here. One, we're both licensed structural engineers, and 2, we both belong to the only 2 companies on stage here that have more than 3 letters in its name.
I like that.
Look at that. And so Clark Pacific is a prefabricated building systems manufacturer. So we design, manufacture, and install precast concrete structures for the data center. So that's the entire thing. Sometimes we'll make just walls. We do the roof, the floor, the walls, columns, beams, the dunnage, the generator buildings, you name it. And in answer to your question, Kurt, this is an easy one. My answer is Kurt Lindorfer. Would you please answer my phone calls?
My name is Don Interdonato. I am a Senior Director of Business Development at VEC. Bring about 26 years now of experience in the AEC industry, and that is through engineering, energy analysis, construction, and facilities management, operations, and maintenance builds. VEC is a constructability partner. We act as a owner's representative for digital delivery. So our GC teams support them in programmatic services and delivery through lifecycle, and then also providing production services to our subcontractor trade partners. We focus across the entire lifecycle of mission critical. And the one person that I really would love to sit down and have a great conversation with would be Conrad Anker, which I know everybody here knows. Conrad is a mountaineer. He soloed Mount Everest without oxygen. He actually found Sir Edmund Hillary, and I'm sure you'll take that stuff home and tell everybody in your family. So, thank you. Excited to be here.
Hi there, everyone. My name is Anthony Canepa. I'm with XYZ Reality. We're a company that's bringing augmented reality to the construction sites, helping with millimeter accuracy setting out and also real-time tracking of the progress of the projects. A bit of my past, I spent 6 years working with Microsoft. I was their global construction schedule lead. If any of you were sending schedules to Microsoft at the time, they probably landed on my desk at some point. I spent, as I said, 6 years with them, and then I also worked for 4 years at Yonder Group as their global VP for project controls. Left them at the sale earlier this year and joined XYZ. Regarding a person I'd love to meet, Nikola Tesla, obviously an energy engineer. Within 2 minutes, talking to him about data centers, I'm sure he'd probably solve all of our power wars.
Thank you very much. Actually, I was going to do Nikola Tesla, and I thought, no, I got to leave that for the team. So anyway, with that said, we're going to go ahead and get started. So, how have advances in modular engineering and fabrication shortened the project timeline delivery for data centers, specifically in 2025? And what are some of the challenges that you see at scaling these methods? So, Don, Steve, Jeff, or Blake?
Yeah, I can speak to that, I guess, from kind of the earliest part of the standpoint there. In terms of modular, engineering and modular carrying through. The ability on the model side of this, right, is to be able to create that fabrication process, to build out skids, to build out sticks, whatever's going to make it out to the site. That obviously is advancing, what we can do with the speed that it can be done, and to accurately have that delivered on site. So I think that's one of the, it's obviously a very advantageous component to getting better materials to the site, better materials at time.
Thanks, Don.
Yeah, with the compressed timelines that we're working with today, it really makes sense for us to industrialize the construction of many of the components that go into the data center. So from the aspect of the labor shortage, with quality, with safety, sustainability, ESG, all those things that kind of wrap into it, really doing those kinds of things inside a temperature-controlled environment with professionals, and then ship those to the site to be installed and connected. That really is what makes sense today. In the past, we had a little bit more flexibility when it came to designing a specific bespoke data center. Today, everything needs to be really standardized. We need resilience, and we need all those things built into it. And so prefabrication is really the way that we achieve that.
Sure.
I mean, I think I would just add, these types of methodologies, they've been in play for the last decade or more. It's great that we have all those tools. I think a big part of it, I don't have the solution yet, but like, how do we combine them and increase the throughput? And what I've been most excited about over the last years as I kind of explore opportunities for our program and look at suppliers is seeing a number of the systems that are coming to the fore, but then how do they get scaled and propagated across the country? So, and I know there's some suppliers that are doing that, and we're starting to investigate those things, and I think that's what's going to be more important. I think the good news is obviously we know the demand's there's good capital backing with it, and it's now time to kind of step up and make that happen, and you see a few examples of that with some of the suppliers, and seeing more of it now, as far as, how do you go from, back in 2016 or so, we were looking at, delivering a couple hundred megawatts a year, and now people are, not even a couple hundred, I mean, it was less, and now you're talking towards gigawatt side, or even delivering 400 or 500 in any annual year. It's a big order. So supplying it, I know we got a supplier here, is a good perspective on how we're going to scale up.
So you touched on, I want to address your question at the end, is what are the challenges? It was mentioned compressed timelines. The asks that we're getting right now for the speed of delivery are pretty wild. People are looking to go extremely quickly. How fast can you get product on site? And not just quickly, but the scale at which we're being asked to deliver, and you combine those two, that's a huge challenge. And then you add in geography. So you have to be a manufacturer that's already set up with an infrastructure, And with multiple methods for delivery, you can't just be a one-trick pony. You have to have different ways of delivering these projects, whether it be self-performing the manufacturing, partnering with other manufacturers that are like-minded, that have similar quality control needs, expertise to deliver those products, and looking at and thinking outside the box. Are we just going to deliver products out of one location? Are we going to look at near-site, on-site manufacturing? We are being asked to do things that are unprecedented, that haven't been done before, so we have to do things that haven't been done before. And that's the approach that we're taking. We're delivering at scale, utilizing our past experience doing so. 15-minute drive from here is Apple Campus 2. It's over 4 million square feet. All entirely prefabricated. I bet you most people in this room don't know that, but Clark Pacific delivered that entire campus with prefabricated components manufactured in California. Having a setup in manufacturing like that and the know-how to scale up and ramp up production to deliver when you're asked for product in 4 months is very important.
Yeah, thanks. So let's briefly talk about AI. I don't know if anyone's heard of that, but yeah. So do you see that AI is helping you, Steve, in the production of some of your facilities?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the most applicable example we've been using right now is AI for scheduling analysis and looking and evaluating design. So with the A&E firms that we're working with and mapping out the kind of scalable, repeatable module, that's kind of the easy part, but really trying to uncover new ways on how we're going to design, procure, and deliver it. And so with generative scheduling, there's technologies out there like Alice technologies that have been around quite some time, and I've had experience with them with a past employer, where you can build up, like, what is it, the 4D, right, in your BIM. Scheduling is the fourth element, but it really brings a lot of power to look at the supply chain and the recipes that you bring together in the application and then test different scenarios. And I think it is for those unprecedented things like we were just talking about, looking at new ways of either combining suppliers or teams in different geographies or different supply chains and seeing how you can most efficiently map out and plan the delivery of a project. And what's good about that is it allows a number of iterations quickly that, certainly schedulers can do that too. And I'll kind of let you speak to that, right? You can get a few good scenarios over a month, but with these kinds of tools, you can rapidly iterate and discover something quickly.
Very much so. And what I actually think will complement that and really start to speed up that process and the accuracy is actually the way we start to measure our sites. If we're being honest, precision of how we measure progress has not been good today. But as these technologies are changing, and not to too much plug XYZ as an example, but if you're going and measuring the site day by day, and that's linking back to your schedule, and now you're getting real-time data of how long does it take to install, and then you start to combine that with multiple projects and multiple versions of projects, you can pull all of that together and you start to really use AI in its true capacity. Essentially, it's an algorithm at the end of the day, right?
Change and improve from the learning.
Yeah, indeed.
Well, that's terrific. Anybody else want to jump in? So let's talk a little bit about some of the supply chain strategies. So, obviously, post-pandemic, we've pulled back a lot of the manufacturing, or we have the desire to pull the manufacturing back here to the States, but there still is manufacturing happening overseas, and so is the onshore manufacturing happening quickly enough, and is the inventory increasing to allow us to take advantage of that? And how, maybe what other ways have we mitigated some of the disruptions and the risks that we had pre-pandemic?
Yeah, so as far as onshoring goes, it's certainly happening to some extent. I think a lot less than people believe it would or should. So one of the things you can do is obviously set up suppliers that are regional as opposed to across the world. So maybe Mexico or another closer country. But besides that, just because they make it in the United States doesn't mean that the supply chain issues disappear. There's so much demand, it doesn't matter how much we try to make, sometimes there's certain components that we just can't keep up with. So, having a strategic buffer, working with your partners, whether that's the OEM or a distributor or somebody that's going to work with you hand in hand through the process, keep your inventories on really critical items, and make sure that those are delivered on your schedule. You may even have to negotiate with them, sign some NDAs, but negotiate with them on the timelines, make a reservation, so to speak, on some of the products that you might need, because all of your competitors are also trying to do the same things for the most part. So yes, it's happening, but we can't just think that that's going to solve the problem.
Sure. Is anybody taking advantage of the onshore manufacturing right now in any of your projects? Okay.
We're a domestic
Yeah, you
manufacturer.
are. Yeah,
so-
yeah. So, okay, let's chat briefly about some, how to improve collaboration a little bit. So, what are some practical measures, Don, that, that we can use to improve the collaboration on the design and engineering, and of course the construction, because it has to get built. And how does that help on the operations side of the equation?
Yeah, well, again, I'm gonna look at this from a digital delivery perspective, right? We've been doing this for 20 years. BIM has been around since 2002, 2004. And it's almost followed this traditional perspective of what construction did. Without it, it's become a siloed environment. Everybody is good at what they do, and everybody knows they're good at what they do. But at the end of the day, what needs to happen here is this collaborative process that needs to occur within a digital thread. So it's taking the project early on, right, from an owner's perspective and determining where the importance is as you move through this process. Architects have BIM execution plans, GCs have BIM execution plans, there's LOD matrices, there's information required across the job. Now we start to add in things for procurement, bills of material. That's impacted by time, right? And the time that it takes, or the time that's been shortened to actually perform a job now. And we're talking in the 300 plus megawatts per project, right? So it's the proper planning, which we are looking into and working on today, to make these determinations about what is actually in the contract. What is everybody responsible for, and when are you responsible for it? Because we can do a lot of these things extremely well, and we've been able to do them extremely well as a community and as individual companies, and then we should be able to bring that together, right? Be able to bring this together into a better process, into a singular process, and hold the accountability around what it is that everybody needs to do within that process. Being able to go after a job and not being able to complete it, that's a problem, right? So you should be held accountable for things like that, right? It's creating this ability to deliver a job better, and that is going to impact the amount of time that it takes and the cost to do that job, especially if we're starting to look into things around constructability, right? Moving from a design package into a construction package and being able to reduce the amount of clashes. If we could even reduce them by 20%, what does that save on the back end? Right? So it's time for us to take a look at what it is that we're expecting everybody to do and create a better vessel, really, in this digital delivery to execute a job better. And I think that's where we're going to find a lot of these efficiencies.
Sure.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, I mean, the coordination up front is so critical when you're talking about prefabrication and modular systems. You can't design conventionally with the idea that, okay, after we get through DDs, we'll start thinking about what prefabricated components we want to use. So we found a lot of success. More than half of the projects that we're involved with right now, we're working directly with the developer at the basis of design and reference design development stage. Before you get into even discussions with the design team and development of your schematic design drawings, we're actually creating the documents that are then being provided to the design team at kickoff to start talking about right sizing and to start doing test fit. And so developing those documents and that kind of roadmap for your design early on, whether it be the core and shell, which is I'm involved with, right, Clark Pacific, or if it's power skids and how you're doing your IT infrastructure over the rack, if it's modularized and prefabricated, what is that system, and getting that into your specs or your BOD before you start designing. That's where it has to begin, because if you want to go fast, you can't wait and do those later on.
No, I agree, and having been involved in the data center development world for the last 25 years, and you know, it's sort of sometimes what's old is new too. When I first became an architect and got out of school, I was thrown on some jobs that were design build, and you're kind of like, wait, all these people are here at the table at the beginning, you know, and we all know what design build is, and then you see things evolve over time into lean construction and integrated project delivery, all these things we've heard. Those are the tools and the framework that are really going to allow owners and developers to move quickly. And I agree, you need to work with suppliers from the start on designs and systems and integrating them into a basis of design to move quick. I think one of the biggest tricks and the challenges we face right now is where do you lock in certain, you know, backbone and say structure and major chunks of infrastructure, but there's so much variability from our customer side on their load on the floor. And you know, spent plenty of time in the other talks about density and how to address that. And so it's not an area that I totally have a solution for yet, but having the agility and speed for that, the other 40% of the equation, right? Like I feel like with the other techniques we're talking about, you know, which have been in the industry, but now you just got to take them to that next level and scale them up. The design, build, and the integration of teams, you know, one team in a room, it's really the way to go. Yeah.
You know, some of that collaboration that we used to do and kind of forward thinking, when we started a year or two ago, we used to put all the heavy equipment on the ground floor and put the servers on the second floor because it was like, oh, still never going to get big.
Yeah.
And now we're kind of going, well, maybe we're switching that around a lot, you know, and so, and some of that collaboration Steve and I did across the same table over the years. So let's talk a little bit about construction delivery models. And, you know, you've heard all sorts of different models up here. You know, essentially in the mission critical space, we see a lot of design build. We see a lot of design bid build. You know, what are we seeing, you know, as the most, in your guys' opinion, what's the most efficient delivery model to get that product out, get that shell built for that user? And, you know, is it get the precast building out there? Is it get the steel building out there? Or is it, as we talked a little bit about, planning ahead and making sure that what we design is what is going to get constructed? So maybe you guys can talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, Steve touched on this. Design build is definitely the way to go if you want to go with speed and you want to be efficient with your design, because you've got all the key stakeholders in the room from the beginning. We also aren't just designing in a silo, right? We're not planning, you know, creating an erection plan for all of the precast components for the floor and the roof on our own, and then saying, okay, we're done, here you go, GC, get your follow-on trades in. And no, we're actually coordinating upfront early the parallel path activities on site so that we know that, okay, what's the critical path? Oh, you need the electrical rooms first. Okay, we can erect the electrical rooms in 3 weeks. We can get out of that area. You can bring in follow-on trades. You start bringing in your electrical equipment, wiring them up while we're still erecting the rest of the building, right? We're understanding what is important for getting the building, or at least not the whole building, one data hall online as quickly as possible. So we might go fast for the first 6 weeks, get that first data hall done, and then we're going to get out in front with, you know, the shell.
It's production assembly mentality.
Correct.
You know, rather than sequential or.
And so that type of delivery is much better facilitated with design build.
Is that what you're seeing, Anthony?
Yeah, very much so. And I think, you know, whichever philosophy we choose, the objective is actually to move things to the left. And by to the left, I mean away from the finish line. The sooner you can make those decisions, the sooner you can get ahead of them. You know, in most instances, they're already baked into the project, so you need to go and find them. Move them to the left, come up with a collaborative solution to resolve them using all parties, and then allow us to proceed to move forward. As a scheduler, that's where you'll get your benefits. You know, we spoke there about IPD. You know, on the right, it's hard to implement, but when implemented properly, you're going to see about a 20% reduction in your schedule timelines if you use an IPD. It allows you to do modular early. We know the benefits that modular gives us to move the on-site hours off-site. With that comes better installation, safety, the quality aspects are better. So for me, it's whatever moves things to the left, finds those problems early.
Have you guys seen much IPD in the data center space? I haven't seen that recently.
For me, from European sector, we
Sure.
do see it. I have had a few projects in the US and Midwest that have also utilised it. Again, the objective is, and it's the same wherever we go, we're kind of bringing these teams together, sometimes from many parties that bring together and ask them to be a high-performing team for maybe 18 months without any prior interaction. And in doing that, it goes back to those basic principles: collaboration, communication, and giving everybody their moment, whichever facet they're an expert in. They all complement to bringing these facilities online.
Yeah. What we see a lot of times is, the trust building that has to happen early on to get the project rolling. Is when Blake says, "Oh, we've taken care of it." It's like, okay, well, how can you? We don't have the, we don't have the pipe size yet. Let's make sure. Let's back up a little bit. Let's make sure of that. Or maybe he says, "Hey, we already accounted for it because we knew it was coming." It's like, "Oh, good job."
So this is why you should answer my phone calls.
Joe, did you want to share anything?
Well, I do think that what these guys were saying was correct, and I think Steve sort of said something that made sense, is that parallel construction, not serial or sequential, however you want to call it, is important, because we can be developing certain components, certain parts of the building simultaneously, and you can bring in some of the power equipment even before maybe some of the final contracts are signed and agreed upon. So we have to just look at it in this compressed timeline, is we got to be doing everything kind of at the same time, as opposed to, okay, we got this part done, now let's get these guys in here and start on the next portion.
Sure. So let's talk about early stage, since we're on the collaboration phase. Let's talk a little bit about the early stage and continuous collaboration. A lot of times with some clients, they say, okay, we're going to have a kickoff meeting and everybody's happy and they're cheery, and we'll go out for a beer or whatever. And then we don't see each other again until construction starts. And we see each other on a screen. But that, you don't build trust over a screen, in my opinion. So I'm just wondering, what do you guys see as a cadence to help build this collaboration across the project development, both on the design side as well as on the construction side?
I'll jump in there if that's okay. I sometimes say to the teams, they believe they've started with the early collaboration, and I ask them, what stage of the project did you bring the commissioning team in? What's the purpose of that question is, I believe we bring the commissioning teams on far too late into the process, and actually we should look at these facilities. I think it was referenced before to the Tarantino approach. Work from the back, the finish, back to the start, and in doing so, look at commissioning, ask the question, how are you going to turn up this facility? How are you going to commission it? Commissioning is actually pretty rigid, it's prescriptive, whereas some areas of the build are actually more flexible. The construction methodologies, the organisation of the site, and the methods we want to take the approach. But commissioning, if you're really into collaborative approach, commissioning should be there day one, pull the team around the table and look at how are everybody going to contribute to turning up this facility. If I'm honest, you probably go back and look at your design and change it to accommodate commissioning as well.
Yeah, I think especially because of the scale of the chunks of delivery these days, it's a big difference from commissioning 2 to 4 megawatt stuff, maybe 4 to 6 years ago, and now people want 20 to 40 at a throw. And I think you got to design. You got to begin with that end in mind, like you said, and design for commissioning. And I think it will. I've seen it affect our approach to infrastructure design for sure.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, again, it's just coming back to the end in mind, right? If we're going to really just pull this thing the whole way back, it comes down to how it's going to be executed, how it's going to be programmed through, right? Everybody understands where they are, what their responsibilities to the project are, and that creates the collaboration, and that collaboration comes through the communication of what the expectations around that project should look like. That ultimately fosters the ability to get things moving quicker. It allows us to figure out all the things that are not working sooner, as opposed to being in a reactive state. And it allows us to shift. I believe it actually allows us to shift when things can be done sooner in the process, because now we have a better understanding of what it is, what it looks like, and especially when we're looking at compressed schedules, and what the cost, what is that going to impact us as? That'll allow us to get things done sooner, make better decisions throughout the process.
Sure. You know, we see this happen a lot of times. There is a trend in some end users that they specify the building components. And you know, especially there's certain components that you have that are dependent upon the future loads that are coming in that haven't been designed yet. And so, you know, it's funny when we start a project, you're talking about, you know, commissioning. One of the first questions I always ask is, okay, what about fire protection? You know, have they been talked to yet? Because there's going to be some 12-inch pipes, and they're going to go right where you don't expect them. They're going to want to go right through, you know, Blake's precast element, and all of a sudden it's like, oh wow, we can't do that. And it's like, okay, let's get people kind of collaborating on these elements that historically come at the very end. And you know, saying we always have is, yep, it always bites you in the ass, you know. And so it's
so continuous conditioning kind of throughout the whole process,
yeah,
so that you can find the problems before they become too big.
100%. I mean, we're a big proponent when we do a steel building as opposed to a precast. We're a big proponent of concrete on the roof, and it isn't necessarily for the performance of the building. It makes it easier for the contractor to lay his pipes on the roof and move everything around. And so many times the owners are like, no, we can't do that. It's too expensive. It's like, no, you know, talk to the contractor. You know, they might have that different idea. So anyway,
It's just to your point, Kurt. When that model might be a quarter mile, a mile and a quarter away from the rest of the building, and nothing's really done within those constraints, makes it very challenging, right? So again, there's an accountability, right, and an ownership to that project, right, that can be mandated and governed, right?
Yeah.
So for us to do that, because that's for everybody in the benefit at the end of the day of the project, right? Because that information needs to be available and not fixed later on the timeline, right?
yeah, exactly. So how do we see we have a few developers, owners here. You know, how are your expectations evolving around this speed to market? I mean, a lot of you have worked with very successful developers and end users, and now you're being asked to accelerate everything. Are you being pushed beyond where you guys think logistically you can achieve that end deadline? So it's kind of an open question for everybody.
I think Steve's gonna have the best answer to this, but I can tell you what I'm seeing. I'm seeing that it's being driven by these end users who they say, hey, I want this much capacity, and here's an RFS date, and I'm gonna give it to 10 developers right now and say, hey, can you get this to me in 12 months? And I'm just gonna see. And then they're all gonna go crazy like mad, and they're gonna call me and they're gonna say, hey, we got this huge opportunity. It's with this end user, hyperscaler XYZ, and we gotta be able to deliver, and we got an RFS date in 12 months. Can we do it? And I'm like, okay.
And then you call me.
Yeah.
But I don't answer.
And I say, yeah, we can do it, but this is what we got to do, and we need releases now. What, do you have funding? Well, we don't have funding because we don't have a lease yet. So you have this, it's a circular problem because you need to go fast, but you can't get funding until you have a lease, but you can't get a lease until you can prove that you can deliver on the time that they're asking, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a valid scenario for sure, and from a developer perspective, you know, we're developing projects at scale, speculatively, if you will, but you can only do so much of that, and there's so much within the finance and the fund structure and what have you. And it's important eventually during that process to lock into a lease. I mean, that's the obvious statement, and be able to tailor that building product to the customer's needs. I think the big challenge right now is, even if you look across the hyperscalers, when you get their design requirements, or SOQ, CDE, RFP, whatever they send you, there is a high level of variability in those right now. And there is a sort of backbone and a basis you can establish. I think to the point about the speed and being able to position it, as a developer, we can commit to so much because there's a common denominator that'll work for many of the customers. But then the balance of it, and these things are all infrastructure now, the ratios, I mean, they've always been infrastructure driven, right? But 60% white space or floor in the building, 40% everything else. Now it's like 37, you got all this equipment space, and we're gonna need new answers on that design anyway, because you can't keep throwing, the same thing at it. But the point would be, you do as a development company, you can go so far, you've got to lock into a lease and then adjust and deliver it. That doesn't always line up with the time frames to get the equipment or those other pieces. And sometimes even on the shell, because there's some ratios in shell design, long, narrow, more squarish, depending on the customer. You can kind of put yourself as a developer not in the running even if just simply look at your ratio or megawatt per foot is a bit off. They're gonna be like, yeah, I don't really fit well, and so we're here to solve those problems creatively, and so that's the big challenge on the development side. And so get those calls too.
Yeah.
And
Thanks.
I mean, speed is the nature of the game, right? We're all in a race, and the justification of that is the financial aspect. When you turn up the facility, companies make money. I've been a developer as well. We assessed our whole portfolio, and I looked at, again, from a schedule perspective, what the benefit was of delivering 90 days early compared to 90 days late across the whole portfolio. Significant amount of money. Obviously, you impact the revenue, you impact the cash flow, and then you impact future prospects development. When we analysed that, the difference, the range was approximately 500 million. That's the cost of a new DC, the next one.
Yeah.
That's why speed is so important to everybody. Whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent, we're being pushed that way. We are being asked to push those frontiers, and it is because of the financial benefits.
Sure. Well, I think we've got some questions.
Okay, feedback there. All right, so I'm going to try to choose concise ones, be concise. We're going to go through a couple. We got a cocktail party and a drawing for the winner of the booth challenge thing. What do you think is the most critical component that needs to be prefabbed that is not currently being done that way? This could be for anyone, not just you, like putting it started if you want.
Well, since I'm not an electrical engineer, I think you're talking thousands of electrical subcontractors on site putting these data centers together. So the more times you can componentize or prefabricate runs of conduits or electrical feeds, that there's logic in that, and sometimes logic isn't always the answer, but frequently in these buildings it is. So
I think the design is critical in that too, because if you're going to modularize those things, prefabricate them, you need to make sure that it's distributed along the rest of your building. You can't put all of your power on one side and then expect to modularize the way that you distribute it to your racks. Same thing with your water and your cooling. Where are your chillers located? Are your chillers all in the yard over on one side? And now you've got to be able to get that 1,000 feet to the last rack row in the building. Whereas if you have modularity and this prefabricated approach, where in mind from the start, you're going to distribute that evenly across the building, and then that gives you opportunities with the structure where you can then integrate that into your roof system instead of doing a floor supported, and that's what we're doing as well. And I'm going too long, but I think there's a lot of opportunities for integration of different components and systems into your structure that Clark Pacific is finding opportunities for.
I mean, and the buzzword is design it for manufacturing and assembly. Not to have 1,000 trades on site. We talked about that earlier too. And the good news is the suppliers and the techniques exist, and we see more and more like multi-trade rack work being done. hot aisle containment, I was excited to learn about a few things while I was here because I'd heard about it and it's coming at scale. So those things are happening, and it's great that our industry is pushing that to occur.
And to everybody's point, right, is to increase the amount that's being done today, right? The ability for more companies to be able to increase that output and modularity, and that is what we're going to find. It's going to drive that success.
Sure. How about another one, Adam?
Okay, let's have this maybe be the last question. It's a good one. What are the 3 largest roadblocks to expediting the pre-con and construction schedule?
What was the last part?
What are the 3 largest roadblocks to expediting the pre-con and construction schedule?
I'll take the first one. It goes back to everybody understanding at the beginning what they're building, and again, how that facility is turned up. For me, that's the biggest priority that then dictates how everybody else is going to contribute to the build. So there's one.
I actually think that one of the biggest challenges that we always have is many people are reluctant to tell Steve, you can't change it. It's gonna affect your schedule. Nobody wants to tell that to the owner because you're paying the bill. But the trust that we talked about earlier is, hey Steve, that's not gonna work, and here's why it's not gonna work from our perspective. So I think getting people unabashed to speak out and say, yep, that's probably not gonna work. It may not be in your best interest, but if you do it, here is what the impact is. And so the owner can make an educated decision.
Avoiding the games of chicken, who's going to be the one to tell them? It's not going to be us. Make it the structural engineer tell them.
And I think it depends on the owner too. Not that I think that's a true statement for sure. But many owners, and I think it's more out of experience and where I've been, like at Digital Realty, we were building and delivering a product. Now it wasn't at the scale that we're talking about now. I left in 2016, so I'm sure they're doing much bigger things than when I left then. But we were militant about not changing. So it does depend on the owner. That said, what you just brought up, like with the clients and the customers, and in these compressed schedules, there's still so much variability. Like we've seen with some of the major hyperscalers over the last year and a half, the detailed requirements have changed 3 times. That's okay, because that's the space we're in right now. But just got the latest one, and it's like, oh, everything's up by a factor of X times, come on.
Yep.
So we can't say no, we're going to find a way.
Sure.
But it's a great problem to have.
Yeah. I think we're good.
Are we gonna?
I'll add one last thing. I'll just add one last thing to that. From a schedule impact, right? For speed, right? To make sure that we can get this project done at the time frames that we want to. The introduction, right, in the design phase, in the later stages of the design phase, to find constructability, right? Design assist has traditionally done something along those lines, but if we're not defined on interests, right, in this collaborative environment that we're trying to foster through this program, if we can find more constructability within, and we're talking taking this to a higher LOD, giving the subcontractors the opportunity to bid on something more tangible than an intent, that starts to change the game. We have better control, we have better opportunities, right? We can now reduce the amount of time that it actually takes instead of starting over after we bid and win, right? Imagine how much time we can save within there if we start to introduce this now. I think that's where we're going to find some efficiencies as we move forward.
Alrighty. And with that, let's give our speakers a very big round of applause.